in the days of King Ahasuerus, that King Ahasuerus, the one who ruled from 127 provinces all the way from India to Ethiopia, that king sat on the throne in Shushan, and he was given a party. Now, this was not your usual little royal bash. Let's have a nosh, have a little wine, tour the palace. No, 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 no. This was a knockdown, drag-out, drunken bash solely for the men of the palace. And the purpose was for King Ahasuerus to show off his stuff. He had pillars of marble, he had sofas of gold, he had vats of golden wine flowing, and everything was decorated beautifully, and the king was just strutting his stuff.
Yeah.
Whoa!
Yeah.
Aren't I the greatest guy? I'm such a king. Oh, yeah.
Greatest guy in the world.
I am.
This is the best party ever.
Now, lest you think that it was just the men partying, actually, on another part of the palace, the women were having their own kind of party. They were doing a little drumming, a little dancing, a little singing, a little delving into the divine feminine.
Oh, she had a ruby in her tummy and a ruby in her tummy and a ruby in her tummy
And the feeling's right.
Ladies' night
And the feeling's right.
Well, this had been going on for a while. The party lasted about 3 months. And by that time, King Ahasuerus was feeling a little bit merry. In other words, he was completely soused. And he wanted a grand finale. Now, if you're a kind of petty, insecure, rich ruler who wants to show off your stuff, do you trot out your prized Arabian thoroughbred racehorse?
No.
Do you bring out your prize pet Pekingese poodle?
No.
You bring out your prized possession. You bring out your woman.
Oh, yeah.
And King Ahasuerus had not just any woman. He had a royal queen, a regal woman. She was Vashti. So the king dispatched a passel of eunuchs to the women's party to summon Vashti to appear at the men's party wearing nothing but her royal crown.
By order of King Ahasuerus, ruler from all India to Ethiopia, you are hereby summoned to the royal chambers to appear before the king and his royal guests in all your loveliness, wearing only your crown. Immediately, the king awaits.
And Vashti turned her head and said, "What? Is he drunk?
Who does he think he is?
No
way!
What did she say?
No way!
I didn't hear that.
No way!
Well, King Ahasuerus was really furious, and he didn't know what to do, as usual, because he never could make his own decisions. So he asked one of his advisors what he should do if the queen didn't obey him, and he said,
"This is a very serious problem. If word gets out throughout the kingdom that the queen refuses to obey the king, then tomorrow morning no woman is going to obey her husband anywhere. It's chaos."
If Vashti doesn't have to, I don't have to.
"Not now, honey, I'm on the phone."
"Not tonight. I have a headache."
This Vashti is a really dangerous woman. Yeah. So, we can't let that happen. She is a very dangerous woman, so
depose her!
Dethrone her!
dump her! Well, the word went out that Vashti was to be deposed, dethroned, and the kingdom would be restored to their rightful places as head of the household. Yeah. Well, you know, King Ahasuerus was feeling pretty good about himself, but then, you know something? He got kind of lonely and a little bit confused.
You know, Vashti wasn't really all that bad.
She did me wrong.
I really miss her.
I'm so glad I'm rid of that wench.
What am I gonna do now?
Well, actually, if you're a rich, petty, insecure, lonely ruler, what do? You get a new babe. So King Ahasuerus called for all of the young, nubile, virginal, lovely, innocent types who could never contradict him to come parade around the palace. And they had to be prepared. Now, this wasn't a kind of prepare yourself like powder your nose and put on a nice dress. No. These women, the prospective queens, were to be anointed, massaged for an hour? No. A week? No. An entire month?
Wow.
A year! 6 months with oil of myrrh and 6 months with oil of sweet odors.
I was born for this.
Now, after they were thoroughly anointed and greased up, the king looked at them all. And now among them was a young woman by the name of Esther. And she was the niece of
Mordecai.
who had brought her to the palace for the contest. And you know, Esther always did what her uncle told her to.
And Esther did as Mordecai commanded.
Now, Esther just happened to be an extremely sweet, sensual, young, sweet, innocent, and clueless young woman. Huh?
Oh, anything you say, Uncle Morty.
Whatever. Huh? Aren't I sweet? That was Esther. But the king liked that kind of girl. He took one look at that Esther and he said,
I want you to be my queen.
Well, he put the crown on her head and he took her to live in the palace. Meanwhile, Mordecai was sticking close by and he told Esther not to tell anyone in the palace that she was Jewish. She was instructed to keep her lips zipped.
And Esther did as Mordecai commanded.
Now, while Mordecai was hanging around the palace gates, he just happened to overhear a plot by 2 men to murder the king. And he decided to avert the plot. So he told Esther to warn the palace.
And Esther did as Mordecai commanded.
Now, this was written. The plot was averted. It was written in the palace records. And it was going to come in handy later.
Blow the winds of fate, stirred by the hand of God. The lots are cast, the plot thickens.
Now, right around this time, the king, you know, he never wanted to make his own decisions and he never knew what to do. So he decided he'd gotten a new wife. It was time to get a new advisor. And if you're a petty, rich, insecure ruler and you want a new advisor, what kind of a guy do you think you want to get?
A small-minded,
Puffed up,
Conceited,
self-aggrandizing,
evil,
paranoid type.
kind of like who else but, you ready? Good job. Now, Haman. He was pretty excited about his new job he was going around saying, hey,
I'm pretty important. I'm the new advisor. Oh, everybody look at me.
you think he wanted everybody to wave hello at him?
No.
You think he wanted everybody to salute him?
Yeah.
No. He wanted everybody to bow down. So he walked up to the first guy and he bowed down. And then he walked up to the second guy and he bowed down. Then he walked up to the third guy and he just stood there. And who was that guy? Mordecai! Whoa! Our villain Haman. He was furious. Do you think he wanted to get back at Mordecai?
Yeah.
Oh yeah. But do you think he wanted to get back just at Mordecai? He knew Mordecai was a Jew, and he wanted to get back at all of the Jews. So he went to the king, and he said,
There are people among us who will not obey your laws.
They are a threat to you. These Jews are a dangerous people.
and a decree was sent out in the name of King Ahasuerus that according to the lots that were cast, the purim, that on the 13th day of Adar, all of the Jews, men, women, children, all of them were to be slain and caused to perish by the decree of Haman. Blow the winds of fate, stirred by the hand of God. The lots are cast, the lot thickens. Now, when Mordecai heard about this decree, he tore his clothing like he was in mourning, and he put on sackcloth and ashes. He told all the Jews, and all the Jews in the village were in mourning, in sackcloth and ashes, and weeping in the streets. Now, when Esther got wind of this, she sent a message to Mordecai to find out what was happening. And Mordecai sent a message back to her to say, Esther, it's time that you stand up, reveal yourself, and save your people. Now is the time, Esther. Now is the time, Esther. Now is the time to reveal yourself. And Esther sent a message back to Mordecai.
Are you crazy?
I can't do that. I can't just go to the king, even if I'm the queen. You can't just do that.
It's forbidden. Everyone knows it's forbidden, and the punishment is death.
Unless the king holds out his golden scepter thingy, then your life is spared.
And the king hasn't called on me in 30 days.
I can't do that.
But Mordecai replied,
Do you think you can hide in the king's palace while all of your people are killed?
do you think that your life will be spared? Who do you think you are, Esther?
Where am I? Why do you think you were put here at this time? Don't you think it's just a coincidence that you, a Jew, are here now?
It's not an accident. Now is the time, Esther. Now is the time. It is your destiny. Well, Esther, as you can imagine, was in a little bit of a transition phase. Let's call it a wandering.
But I like it here.
I must be strong and stand up for my people.
But I'm afraid to die.
It's my destiny.
It is your destiny, Esther. And Esther sent a message back to Mordecai. She said, gather all the Jews in Shushan, and I will fast for 3 days. and tell all the people to fast for 3 days on my behalf. And then I will go before the king. And if I perish, I will perish, but I will go. And Esther sent the message to Mordecai. And Mordecai did what Esther commanded. And Esther fasted, and she held her vision before her. She did not feed her body.
She fed her courage.
She fed her intuition.
She fed the strength of her soul. And after 3 days, she dressed herself in her royal garments. And Esther went before the king, and she stepped forward.
In all her beauty.
In all her strength.
In all her glory.
In all her power. And the king took one look at Esther, and he turned his golden scepter towards her. And Esther touched the tip of the scepter.
What wilt thou, my queen?
Whatever you wish, it shall be granted.
And Esther said, if it please the king, and if I have found favor in your sight, what I want is a banquet for Haman! And the king did as Esther commanded. Now, when our little Mr. H heard about the banquet, well, you can imagine, he was pretty happy. All right, a little banquet, just me and the king and the queen. Okay. But there was one thing that was really still bothering him.
I am the most powerful man in the kingdom.
Ooh, that Mordecai, he won't bow down to me. What am I going to do about that?
My ship has finally come in.
That little Jew, he's just a pain in my tushy.
So, Haman went home to his wife, and he asked her opinion.
All of this great fortune doesn't mean anything if that silly little Jew won't bow down to me. What will I do?
Well, you could build a gallows 50 cubits high, and you could have the king hang Mordecai, and then you could enjoy your banquet.
And so, our villain had a gallows built 50 cubits high to hang Mordecai. Blow the winds of fate, stirred by the hand of God. The lots are cast, the plot thickens. Now, with all this thickening of the plot, the king had a hard time sleeping. And what do if you're a king and you can't sleep? Do you summon a few virgins, play a little night music? No, the king actually decided he wanted to read. So, what are you going to read? Maybe a little poetry, a little light fiction, a novel? No. He wanted to read the court records. Now that will really put you to sleep. So he opened up the court records, but he just happened to see the part about Mordecai averting the plot to kill the king and saving his life. And he figured he ought to reward this Mordecai. And so he got up in the middle of the night, and of course, since he never could figure out what to do for himself, he needed advice on how to reward Mordecai. And he was looking around for somebody to give him some advice, and who do you suppose might be awake at 3 o'clock in the morning in the palace waiting for his banquet but And the king asked him,
What is to be done with a man who has delighted the king and whom the king wishes to honor?
and Haman thought,
God, well, he must be talking about me. So, I would clothe him in the king's royal garments.
and put him upon the king's own horse.
Put a crown on his head.
Parade him through the streets, proclaiming to everyone,
This is the man who delighteth to honor the king. Hey, that's a good idea, said Ahasuerus. Do that to Mordecai, the Jew. Well, Haman had to dress Mordecai in the royal robes, put him on the king's horse, put a crown on his head, and parade him through the streets, proclaiming,
this is the man the king delighteth to honor.
Well, he was absolutely ashamed. He was humiliated.